In philosophy, a false dichotomy or dilemma is what I have always referred to as a logical fallacy. It happens when a limited number of options are incorrectly presented as the only options that exist in a situation where that really isn't the case. Now, I swear before all of you today, I knew this from my introduction to philosophy class that I had, almost 20 years ago now. But I'm confessing that I've fallen into the trap of false dichotomies that are quite literally eating away at my own heart and soul. And maybe you are doing the same. It turns out this is very much to be expected. The American Psychological Association calls this kind of thinking, also referred to as either or thinking, a cognitive distortion because it keeps us from seeing the world around us as it truly often is: complex, nuanced, and full of all sorts of shades of gray. And our ability to reduce our situation down to two possible outcomes is a defense mechanism for the stress response we all might be facing. The past 3.5 years have been very difficult for me and many others. My personal and familial relationships have suffered, and before preparing this very sermon, I was certain the issue was with other people. I now see that perhaps it is actually my very own lens of cognitive distortion that might be at play for some of my feelings. I remember playing church as a child in my grandmother's house with my three sisters. They were always the congregation, and I was always, ironically, the minister. I loved praying and teaching the stories from the Hebrew scriptures to my younger and at the time eager sisters. Somewhere inside me was clearly the potential to dance with the mystery of life that I call God, that thing that is so elusive yet so present whenever two or more of us are gathered together, focusing on love and peace. While I loved the mystery, I was taught in my tradition that the mystery wasn't for me, and that in fact, it would never be something that I could even touch as a queer person. I was an abomination. So I packed up my mystery, that mystery of my childhood that gave me such joy, and I stuffed it away. And then came high school, and I found another interest that brought me a similar joy: molecular biology. I was fascinated by the complexity of human genomics, how four simple chemical compounds encoded all of humanity. Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, was my new god, and the joy of my childhood was present again, and yet I still felt somehow incomplete. The circles of people I journeyed with tended not to even see mystery in the field of their study, let alone outside of it. This always felt different, like something was missing, like there had to be more. I didn't really have the words or concepts for my feelings, so I also believed in this false dichotomy. The false dichotomy that people of science could never be people of faith, and that people of faith would always refute science. It wasn't much later on until graduate school, in some clinical rotations I did in where I really supported nurses and physicians in the birthing of babies. I will never forget seeing my first live birth and being amazed at the miracle of human life. There was an odd beauty in the placenta, the miracle present in the room with the umbilical cord, all this helical structure. It reminded me of the same joy of the mystery that I had with DNA. However, my scientific language could not really adequately convey the feelings I was having in that room. There was simultaneous joy and exhaustion from the mother, and elation and wonder from me. I now realize that it is in fact my language of reverence that supports my feelings that I was having in that moment, and others. Anytime I look back where I see a confluence of science and that mystery coming together to move me forward in thought and feeling. The fallacy of dichotomous thinking kept me from allowing myself to honor not only my ability to know through traditional head-centered modes, but also to understand and acknowledge that there is honor in learning from a heart-centered, feeling way. The field of psychology has described all of this dichotomous thinking as expected behavior. As humans who are traditionally experiencing fight and flight responses to various stimuli throughout our life, we tend to oversimplify our situations so that we can make quick and effective decisions to remove ourselves from whatever danger we perceive. It is not surprising that I spent years living in a dichotomous thinking trap. It was my response to a threat, not being welcomed into the full mystery of life. These days, we as humans are faced with so many imminent threats to our global community. Things like the climate demise, witnessed in blood-red skies of our recent weeks, a racial reckoning with our past as a country, the potential collapse of democracy as we know it, just to name a few. And all of those global things don't even honor and acknowledge the difficulties that we may be facing in our own personal scales. Things like homeschooling our children for the first time ever, struggling with sobriety in the middle of a difficult world, depression from increased isolation and limited human contact, or so many other personal areas of concern. We need to recognize our responses to situations and people. For me, it is helpful when I hear or experience something new to take some time to breathe and reflect on what I'm actually feeling. The feelings, I believe, are the key to our responses. I'm going to try in these next few months to remember to reflect on my feelings and really watch my tendency to engage in dichotomous fallacies and that thought response that often kicks in. Perhaps, just maybe, the world is a bit more complex than I'm giving it credit for. Researchers have suggested that one powerful tool to help us combat against this either-or thinking is really to separate who we are from what we do. And I believe that is a powerful secret weapon in the religious community that we are a part of, Unitarian Universalism. Our Universalist ancestors would argue that we are part of an inherent mystery of life, and ultimately we are equipped to accept and exude radical love. This is inherent to our core, regardless of our behavior. It is exclusive to our behavior, which can oscillate from radical love to intense hate and harm. We all fall short. Whatever our behaviors are, our Universalist ancestors believed that we are called to honor the inherent worth in every one of us. This ability to differentiate clearly who we are versus what we do means that we are less likely to fall into a trap of dichotomous thought. If we can only reach out and embrace our universalism, we might be able to understand that many things in life are complex and nuanced.